My name is Alara Vance, and at 32 years old, my life as a struggling textile artist felt perpetually overshadowed. Last Saturday, at the annual Threads of Innovation Gala, the most prestigious event in the national fiber arts community, my world shattered, much like a delicately woven tapestry coming undone. Before I pull back the curtain further on this saga, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you crave more tales of those who refuse to be outsmarted, hit that subscribe button. The setting was the opulent grand hall of the Crimson Loom Gallery, filled with the glitterati of the art world. Amidst the clinking champagne flutes and hushed admiration for the latest artistic marvels, the revered Grandmaster Lena Thorne, a living legend and matriarch of our guild, rose to speak. Her voice, usually a melodic whisper, boomed through the hall, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. Tonight we honor a master of ingenuity. For her groundbreaking new collection, Echoes of Elysium, a true testament to the spirit of innovation, I present the Luminary Weave Award to Serafina Vance. A burst of applause erupted. My sister, Serafina, 29, elegant in a gown of shimmering silk, glided to the stage, her practiced smile radiant. But as I watched her accept the crystal trophy, a chill ran down my spine. Echoes of Elysium was the exact title of my unreleased collection, the one that existed only in my private sketchbooks and hidden studio. I blinked, confusion warring with a creeping dread. Grandmaster Thorne, I murmured, my voice lost in the celebratory din. I haven't exhibited Echoes of Elysium yet. The table around me, filled with other artists and critics, continued their enthusiastic chatter, oblivious to my growing horror. To truly grasp the impact of that moment, you need to understand our dynamic. I, Alara, have dedicated my life to the intricate craft of textile art. For 10 years, I've toiled in obscurity, experimenting with new dyes, sustainable fibers, and ancient weaving techniques. My small studio, tucked away in the quiet, historic district of Silverwood City, was my sanctuary. I've lived frugally, pouring every spare coin into rare pigments and specialized looms, dreaming of the day my unique vision would be recognized. Grandmaster Lena, at 85, was the undisputed queen of the textile arts. She inherited immense wealth and a legendary private collection from her ancestors, maintaining the sprawling Thorne estate where the gala was held. She was known for her discerning eye and notoriously for her selective patronage, often uplifting artists she saw as having star quality, and that star for years had been Serafina. My younger sister, Serafina, a mere 3 years my junior, was the darling of the art world. She specialized in large, flamboyant installations, often presented with dramatic flair. Her social media presence was massive, her charisma undeniable. Where I was meticulous and introverted, Serafina was spontaneous and captivating. When I sought Grandmaster Thorne's mentorship early in my career, hoping for a grant to fund my experimental projects, she had simply said, "Alara, your talent is raw and deep. You'll find your path." And so I had, through painstaking research and countless sleepless nights. Serafina, however, had enjoyed Thorne's financial backing for her grand, often superficial projects, with the Grandmaster covering significant material costs and securing prime exhibition spaces. Our yearly Threads of Innovation Gala was a time-honored tradition at the Thorne estate, a highlight of the artistic calendar. This year, I had arrived early, hoping my new subtle piece, Whispers of the Willow, would finally catch someone's eye. I'd worked an 18-hour day perfecting the piece before rushing to the gala, exhaustion heavy in my limbs. When Grandmaster Thorne had inquired about my current projects during a brief exchange, I'd vaguely mentioned I was close to completing a new series, hinting at Echoes of Elysium, and how I felt it represented a significant leap in my artistic voice. Grandmaster Thorne had nodded thoughtfully, but offered no further comment or support. It stung a little, but I was accustomed to it. What I didn't know was that the real agony was yet to come. As everyone settled around the grand dining tables after the ceremony, a sense of unease settled over me. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers and expensive perfumes. Fireflies drifted outside the panoramic windows, casting a soft glow. Despite everything, I'd allowed myself a flicker of hope. Perhaps this would be the evening my years of quiet dedication were finally acknowledged. Little did I know, the next few minutes would turn everything I thought I understood about my family and my artistic journey on its head, leaving me questioning the very essence of trust. Dinner was in full swing when Grandmaster Thorne, glass raised, tapped it lightly with a silver fork to command attention. This was not unusual. She often made profound announcements at such gatherings. I was mid-bite into a delicate amuse-bouche when she cleared her throat dramatically. I have one more special announcement tonight. Serafina, darling, your Echoes of Elysium collection is truly a revelation. The Guild is so proud to have funded your vision. 12 major installations are no joke, but your genius is worth it. The amuse-bouche turned to ash in my mouth. I slowly set down my fork, certain I'd misheard. Everyone at the table was smiling, some even applauding. My mother, seated next to me, dabbed at her eyes with a lace napkin. "I'm sorry, what?" Grandmaster Thorne beamed. "You don't have to worry about the cost of that exhibition anymore, sweetheart. I covered it in full this morning, $250,000. The critics are already calling it a masterpiece." I felt heat rising in my cheeks as dozens of eyes swiveled between Serafina and me. My mind raced frantically, trying to make sense of her words. Had she confused Serafina with someone else? Was this some elaborate, bewildering joke? "Grandmaster, I don't even have an exhibition titled Echoes of Elysium." The table went completely silent. Forks hovered midair. My father coughed uncomfortably. Grandmaster Thorne's smile faltered, confusion clouding her face. "Of course you do. The ethereal silk banners, the kinetic fiber sculptures. Serafina sent me detailed schematics yesterday." At that exact moment, the grand doors of the gallery opened, and Serafina's chief assistant, a young man named Finn, wheeled in a large covered display. "Sorry I'm late, everyone. Had to ensure the final pieces of the Echoes of Elysium collection were perfectly positioned in the main gallery for the public viewing." The timing couldn't have been more devastatingly perfect. Every head swiveled from me to Finn, then back again. Understanding dawned on faces around the table. My Aunt Felicity's hand flew to her mouth. My cousin Leo muttered, "Oh my gods," under his breath. Grandmaster Thorne stood frozen, her champagne glass still raised, her eyes darting between Serafina and me. For once in her formidable life, she seemed genuinely speechless. Serafina, initially oblivious to the tension, finally sensed something was wrong. Her bright smile dimmed as she took in the scene. "What's going on?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely, choked with humiliation and betrayal. I sat perfectly still, hands clenched in my lap, fighting the urge to flee. My father broke the silence. "Serafina, did you recently unveil a new collection?" "Yes, my Echoes of Elysium. 12 pieces, a culmination of my artistic vision. Just approved for public viewing yesterday. Want to see it? It's right here." "And how did you conceive of this collection?" Serafina's smile wavered. "Well, Grandmaster Thorne helped with the funding, and I just had this incredible surge of inspiration. My creative process was excellent." Every word was another knife in my chest. "I need some air." I stood up so abruptly my chair nearly toppled backward. Without looking at anyone, I walked away from the table, past the dazzling art installations and twinkling lights, into the cool, dark night of the Thorne Estate's vast sculpture garden. Behind me, I could hear the commotion erupting, my mother's voice rising in question, my father's deeper tones demanding answers, Serafina's confused protests, and cutting through it all, Grandmaster Thorne's sharp, authoritative commands for explanation. I reached the ancient wisteria arbor at the far end of the property and leaned against it, gulping in the evening air. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. What had just happened? How could my artistic concept, my deeply personal work, be attributed to someone else? And why had Grandmaster Thorne announced its funding as if it were some grand gesture of generosity toward me? After about 15 minutes, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned, half expecting Serafina with some elaborate lie, but it was my cousin Leo. "Everyone's looking for you." "I can't go back there right now," I replied, wrapping my arms around myself despite the mild evening. "I don't blame you. That was intense." "Did you know about the collection, the funding, any of it?" "Absolutely not. Nobody did. Except apparently Serafina and Grandmaster Thorn in some strange way. But something's off." Grandmaster Thorn seems genuinely bewildered, and Serafina, she's crying, saying there's been a misunderstanding. "But Alara, you might want to check your old project files, the ones you kept on your cloud drive." My blood ran cold. "You think she plagiarized my work?" "I don't know, but as a junior curator, I've seen cases like this before. Family members with access to private artistic concepts." He let me fill in the blanks. Eventually, I composed myself enough to return to the gathering. The festive atmosphere had evaporated entirely. Small groups stood whispering tensely. Serafina was nowhere to be seen. My parents looked shell-shocked, sitting side by side but not speaking. Grandmaster Thorn approached me immediately, her face drawn with concern. "Alara, we need to get to the bottom of this, right now." I nodded numbly, following her inside to her private archive, where the real nightmare would begin to unfold. Grandmaster Thorn's archive had always been off-limits to us as children. The heavy oak door was typically closed, and we understood that her priceless collection of rare fabrics and personal research papers were private. Now, as I followed her into the sanctum, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching someone else's life unravel rather than my own. She commanded, "Sit," gesturing to one of the velvet chairs facing her antique desk. I complied silently, watching as she settled herself behind the massive desk and pulled out her reading glasses. "First things first, do you have any digital copies of your Echoes of Elysium concept? Anything where you might see creation dates or early drafts in your name?" I nodded, pulling out my tablet. My hands were still trembling slightly as I opened my cloud storage app, a precaution I'd taken years ago after an unfortunate studio flood. I hadn't checked it in months, confident in the automatic backups. Except there were no notifications, nothing flagging suspicious activity. I logged in, navigated to the unfinished concepts folder, and froze. There it was, Echoes of Elysium, a folder created 3 years ago, with a subfolder for textile schematics last modified 6 months ago, and an album of detailed digital sketches. But beneath it, a chilling discovery, dozens of older project files dating back years that I had never officially released were tagged with public access granted and had an unknown collaborator listed. "It's here, my unreleased work. And look at these older projects too, they're marked as publicly shared." Grandmaster Thorn's lips thinned to a tight line. "How is that possible? Wouldn't they need your explicit permission? Your digital signature?" "They would need my login credentials, my biometric ID, all information Serafina would have had access to." Memories began flooding back. Serafina borrowing my studio laptop last year because hers had crashed. The time she stayed at my apartment for a week after a creative block, with complete access to my network and devices. The jokes she made about us having such similar artistic handwriting, despite our different styles. "I need to see what else is there," I muttered, scrolling through the app with increasing dread. 24 more publicly accessible files containing concepts I'd abandoned or put aside, now showing collaborator Serafina Vance, and attached to dates corresponding with Serafina's own breakthrough collections over the past 6 years. "Grandmaster, I think Serafina has been stealing my artistic identity for years." Grandmaster Thorn's face had gone pale. Without a word, she picked up her desk phone and pressed a single button. "Send Serafina to my archive immediately." Her tone brooked no argument. While we waited, I continued investigating. I pulled up archived art journals, discovering my once unique motifs subtly altered and incorporated into Serafina's earliest acclaimed works. I checked my digital portfolio trash folder, finding dozens of deleted submission forms for grants and competitions I never entered, all under my name, but linked to Serafina's projects. Serafina had accessed my digital footprint too, systematically erasing evidence of her creative plagiarism. The door opened and Serafina entered. Her makeup was smeared from crying, but her expression was defiant rather than remorseful. "Sit down," Grandmaster Thorn ordered, pointing to the chair beside me. Serafina complied, not looking in my direction. "Explain," I said, turning my tablet screen toward her, displaying the stolen concepts and altered files. "It's not what it looks like," Serafina began, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she'd used since childhood to get out of trouble. "Really?" "Because it looks like intellectual theft and artistic fraud," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the rage and betrayal boiling inside me. "I was going to credit you eventually. Your work is so niche, Alara, and mine is popular. I just needed a little boost to appeal to the masses. Then I'd showcase you as my inspiration. Never know?" "Serafina, there are years of my uncredited work, my unique visions attributed to you." "It's not that much," she muttered, looking down at her hands. "Serafina Elizabeth Vance, are you telling me you systematically plagiarized your sister's original work and presented it as your own?" Serafina's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand how hard it's been for me. Alara has everything figured out, true artistic genius, unwavering vision. I just needed a little help to stand out." "You call undermining my entire career help? I've poured my soul into developing these techniques while you were basking in the limelight of my uncredited creations. Grandmaster Thorn was funding it." I turned to Grandmaster Thorn. "Did you know when you gave her funding for her breakthroughs, did you know she was using my concepts?" Grandmaster Thorn looked stricken. "Absolutely not. Serafina told me these were her original visions. I gave her the grants as an investment in her promise. I had no idea she was building her career by stealing from her sister." Serafina began sobbing in earnest now. "I was going to fix everything. My new gallery show pays really well, and I've been secretly trying to integrate some of your earlier recognized concepts into new works. For one exhibition." "What about all your previous masterpieces? Were those yours too?" Her silence was answer enough. I stood up, unable to sit beside her any longer. "I need to go. I need to figure out how to undo all of this." "Wait," Grandmaster Thorn said, reaching into her desk drawer. She pulled out a thick leather-bound journal and placed it on the desk. "There's more you need to see." As Serafina's eyes widened in recognition of the journal, I realized the night's revelations were far from over. The journal sat between us like a dormant volcano. Grandmaster Thorn's weathered hands rested on top of it, and I noticed they were trembling slightly, something I'd never seen before. My indomitable Grandmaster, always so certain and commanding, suddenly looked every one of her 85 years. "I need you both to understand something. This journal contains observations I've been gathering for the past several months. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, which is why I waited. Perhaps that was a mistake." She opened the journal and withdrew a stack of detailed comparison sketches and meticulous notes, spreading them across the desk. "Alara, this piece was displayed anonymously at the Emerging Talents exhibition 6 years ago. Serafina's Breakthrough Collection Metamorphosis, unveiled a month later, contained a near-identical core concept. I dismissed it as artistic convergence then. I didn't authorize that display. I never submitted that to Emerging Talents." Serafina had gone completely still beside me, her sobbing abruptly silenced. When Alara vaguely mentioned her Echoes of Elysium concept last month, I was confused. It sounded so similar to what Serafina had presented, so I began investigating. She produced more documents, gallery exhibition schedules showing Serafina's works appearing suspiciously soon after I had privately discussed my own nascent ideas with Serafina. Photographic evidence of discarded prototypes from my studio that had inexplicably appeared, subtly altered in Serafina's public installations. Even whispered accounts from studio assistants confirming Serafina's late-night visits to my archived digital files. It appears that Serafina has been systematically appropriating your unique artistic concepts and presenting them as her own for nearly 6 years. The room tilted around me. 6 years. Since the beginning of my quiet, diligent career. Every extra hour I'd spent refining my craft, every art show I'd skipped to save money, all while Serafina was siphoning away my creative soul. How much? Grandmaster Thorne consulted a handwritten summary. By my calculations, approximately 27 major conceptual thefts and direct artistic appropriations. The number hit me like a physical blow. 27 original concepts. It would have established me as a visionary. It would have meant critical acclaim. It would have brought financial stability instead of constant struggle. Serafina, how could you do this? When she finally looked up, I was shocked to see not remorse but resentment in her eyes. It's always been so easy for you. Perfect vision, perfect technique, everyone's favorite pure artist crafting masterpieces, while I was just the pretty commercial sister selling installations. You didn't need the recognition like I did. Didn't need it? I've been working in obscurity, meticulously building my craft, while you've been living off the credit stolen from me. You never noticed. You were so busy with your important art, you never even checked who was submitting your anonymous pieces to obscure exhibitions. If Grandmaster Thorne hadn't stuck her nose in, that's enough. Serafina, what you've done isn't just unethical. It's a profound violation of artistic integrity. Plagiarism, conceptual theft, misrepresentation, these are serious offenses against the very spirit of creation. You wouldn't expose your own sister. The sad truth was, she was probably right. Despite everything, some part of me still remembered the little girl who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, terrified of the lightning. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I need to leave, I need to process this. Grandmaster Thorne nodded, understanding in her eyes. Take these. You'll need them to assert your authorship. As I took the folder, another question occurred to me. Grandmaster, how did you get all these records? Some of these are from my private digital archive. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I may have implied to certain gallery managers and digital archivists that I had your permission. Being the guild matriarch has its advantages. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I needed to know the truth. So Grandmaster Thorne had invaded my privacy too, albeit with better intentions than Serafina. The betrayal felt multi-layered. My sister's deliberate theft, my Grandmaster's well-meaning but unauthorized investigation, and the art world's years of obliviousness to it all. I walked out of the archive without another word, passing through the main gallery where the rest of the family and a few concerned guild members waited anxiously. Their conversation ceased as I appeared, folder clutched to my chest like a shield. Alara, what's happening? What did Serafina do? I couldn't answer. How could I explain that the daughter they thought they knew had been systematically stealing from her sister for years? That their family narrative of one visionary artist and one flamboyant showman was built on a foundation of fraud? Ask Serafina or Grandmaster Thorne. I can't, not right now. I drove home in silence, the folder on the passenger seat beside me like an unwelcome companion. The world outside my windshield seemed surreal. People going about their normal evening activities, unaware that my entire artistic life had just imploded. By the time I reached my small apartment, my shock had hardened into something colder and more resolute. This wasn't just about recognition anymore. It was about years of deception, about a creative relationship built on lies. As I spread the documents across my studio table and began making notes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Things could never go back to how they were before. At 2 in the morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I hadn't slept. How could I? Instead, I'd spent hours at my studio table, organizing Grandmaster Thorne's documents chronologically, creating a detailed timeline of appropriated concepts, and researching artistic copyright and intellectual property recovery steps online. The more I discovered, the worse it became. Serafina hadn't just stolen the Echoes of Elysium concept. She'd claimed credit for my breakthrough dye formulas while I was still a student, diverted my anonymous competition submissions, and even claimed authorship of a series of intricate lacework pieces that coincided perfectly with her much-lauded ephemeral forms exhibit 3 years ago. My phone had been mercifully silent until now, allowing me to work through the evidence undisturbed. But suddenly, it erupted with notifications, text messages, voicemails, and Guild app alerts from nearly every member of my family and several Guild colleagues. "Ilara, please call us. We're worried sick about you. Your mother is in tears. Whatever happened, we can fix this as a family." "Just heard what happened. Absolutely disgraceful. Call if you need anything. Let me know if you need a legal consultant. My colleague Anya specializes in artistic rights. Don't do anything until we talk. I can help navigate the Guild protocols." And then, most surprising of all, a message from Grandmaster Thorn. "I've made arrangements for Seraphina to acknowledge everything. Come by the Thorn estate tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Bring the folder." The only person who hadn't messaged was Seraphina. I set the phone down, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of concern. Where had all this support been when I was working double shifts to afford my materials? When I'd mentioned taking the bus to gallery showings because my old car had died? The family's sudden interest felt too little, too late. Still, I found myself typing a response to Leo. He was a junior curator, not a copyright lawyer, but he'd understand the Guild's regulations better than I did. "Still awake if you want to call." My phone rang seconds later. "You should be sleeping." "Fair point. How bad is it?" 27 distinct conceptual thefts plus potential damage to my artistic reputation. And it's definitely Seraphina, without question. She admitted it, Leo, right in front of Grandmaster Thorn. She seemed more annoyed at being caught than sorry for what she did. That tracks. "Listen, Ilara, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you planning to pursue formal Guild arbitration or public denouncement?" The question hung in the air between us. I'd been avoiding it all night, focusing instead on the practical steps of recovery. I don't know. Part of me thinks she deserves it. Another part remembers she's my sister. The sister who stole years of your creative essence. Yeah. What would happen if I did pursue it? Leo shifted into Guild advisor mode. Intellectual theft across this scale is a severe breach of Guild ethics. She could face public censure, significant fines, potentially even permanent disbarment from major exhibitions. Best case scenario for her would be forced public acknowledgement of your authorship, mandatory workshops on artistic integrity, and a permanent mark on her professional record. The thought of Seraphina stripped of her accolades made my stomach twist, despite everything. And if I don't pursue charges? Then she faces no formal Guild consequences. You can still assert your authorship, but recovery becomes more complicated without a formal report. And she could potentially do this to someone else in the future. That thought hadn't occurred to me. If Seraphina was capable of systematically defrauding her own sister for years, what would stop her from targeting other emerging artists? Grandmaster Thorn messaged that she's arranged for Seraphina to acknowledge everything, I said. Does that make a difference legally? Not really. The artistic violations were still committed, but it might factor into any sentencing if you did pursue charges. Leo paused. What does acknowledge everything even mean? She's presented all your work as her own, hasn't she? I assume Grandmaster Thorn is providing some form of restitution, I said, the realization dawning as I spoke. She feels responsible somehow. She did fund Seraphina's breakthroughs for years and didn't notice the pattern. We talked for another hour discussing practical steps. Leo advised gathering all digital evidence, formally registering all my unreleased works with the Guild's Copyright Office, and preparing a detailed artistic impact statement for a potential arbitration. He offered to accompany me to Grandmaster Thorn's estate in the morning. After we hung up, I sat in my dark studio staring at the scattered documents that represented years of betrayal. The hurt and anger remained, but now they were joined by something else, a cold, clear determination. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be a passive victim in my own artistic life anymore. I spent the next hour implementing Leo's advice, meticulously cataloging my digital files, securing new cloud backups, and drafting formal artistic dispute letters. As I worked, more messages arrived from family members, ranging from supportive to accusatory. Heard you're trying to get Serafina publicly shamed. Bit extreme, don't you think? Family matters should stay in the family. Guild investigations just make everything worse. These messages stung, but they also strengthened my resolve. The family dynamics were becoming clearer. Some would prioritize peace over justice, expecting me to forgive and forget for the sake of harmony. They wanted the problem to disappear quietly, not for Serafina to face real consequences or for me to receive real restitution. Around 4 a.m, exhaustion finally won out. I gathered the documents into the folder and collapsed into bed, setting my alarm for 8. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, one thought circled in my mind. Whatever decision I made in the coming days would permanently alter my relationship with my family and my place in the art world. The Alara who had sought approval and acceptance was gone, replaced by someone who now understood the true value of standing up for herself, whatever the cost. Leo picked me up at 9:30 the next morning, looking surprisingly professional in a crisp linen suit despite the early hour and weekend timing. I, on the other hand, had managed only to throw on comfortable clothes, my hair pulled back in a hasty bun. Sleep had been elusive, and the little I'd gotten had been plagued by dreams of my art dissolving into thin air. "You look terrible," Leo observed as I climbed into his car, the leather folder clutched to my chest. "Thanks, that's exactly what I need to hear right now." He smiled apologetically. "Sorry, just concerned." "Did you sleep at all?" "Maybe 2 hours," I admitted. "I kept thinking about what you said, about Serafina potentially doing this to someone else if there are no consequences." Leo nodded, pulling away from my apartment building. "It's a valid concern. Artistic crimes often escalate when unpunished." The drive to Grandmaster Thorn's estate was short but tense. I decided not to make any final decisions about pursuing formal charges until I heard what Grandmaster Thorn and Serafina had to say. But I'd prepared questions and talking points based on Leo's advice. Whatever happened, I wouldn't be manipulated or guilt-tripped into a resolution that left me holding the bag for Serafina's crimes. Grandmaster Thorn's estate looked different in the harsh morning light. Less like the magical setting of childhood memories, and more like what it was, an aging mansion with peeling paint on some cornices and slightly overgrown hedges. The remnants of yesterday's gala had been cleaned up, the grand displays removed, as if Grandmaster Thorn was trying to erase all evidence of the disastrous gathering. Several cars were parked in the driveway, my parents', Serafina's sleek new coupe, and an unfamiliar black sedan with a discreet Guild Arbitrator Services logo on the door. "Grandmaster's called in reinforcements," Leo murmured as we approached the front door. Before we could knock, the door swung open. Grandmaster Thorn stood there, her usual imposing presence somewhat diminished by the clear signs of a sleepless night mirroring my own. "You brought Leo," she observed, not sounding particularly surprised. "That's probably wise." "He's here as my cousin, not my counsel," I clarified, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Grandmaster Thorn nodded, stepping aside to let us enter. "Everyone's in the grand salon." "Everyone?" I tensed. "I'm not ready for a full family intervention, Grandmaster." She replied, "Not everyone," amending her words. "Your parents, Serafina and Miss Anya Sharma from the Guild Arbitrator Services. She's helping sort out the mess." I followed her through the house, Leo close behind me. The grand salon, the same one where countless family holidays had been celebrated, was now covered with documents, laptops, and artistic proofs. My parents sat on one side, both looking, well, pretty shell-shocked. Serafina was at the far end, eyes downcast, a crumpled tissue in her hand. Across from my parents sat a middle-aged woman in a crisp suit, who rose when we entered. "Alara," she said, extending her hand. "Anya Sharma. Your Grandmaster asked me to help facilitate this situation." I shook her hand automatically, still taking in the scene. "What exactly is this situation?" "Please sit down," Grandmaster Thorn directed, taking her place at the head of the table. "Anya has helped me develop a comprehensive plan to address everything." I sat cautiously, placing the folder in front of me. Leo took the seat beside me, his presence bolstering my courage. "Before we begin, I want to be clear that I haven't decided whether to file a formal guild complaint or pursue public denouncement. I'm here to listen, but I'm not committing to anything yet." Grandmaster Thorn nodded briskly. "Understood. Anya, please explain the plan." The guild arbitrator opened a leather portfolio. "Based on the documentation provided by your Grandmaster and our preliminary analysis conducted overnight, we've confirmed unauthorized artistic conceptual appropriations totaling approximately 27 distinct works over 6 years. Additionally, there's the matter of reputational damage and potential ethical violations. This is a proposed restitution and recognition agreement, Miss Vance." Serafina acknowledges the full extent of the conceptual debt and agrees to an ongoing acknowledgement according to the following terms. She slid a document across the table to me. I scanned the document, Leo reading over my shoulder. It outlined a multi-year public acknowledgement plan, with Serafina explicitly crediting my original concepts in her future works and public appearances. Additionally, Serafina would retract her claims to the Echoes of Elysium collection, which would then be properly credited to me. Most surprisingly, the agreement included a detailed confession statement, comprehensive enough to serve as evidence if I did decide to pursue formal guild action. "This is comprehensive," Leo remarked, clearly impressed despite himself. "There's more," Grandmaster Thorn said, her voice steady. "Turn to page 3. I flipped to the indicated page and found myself looking at a deed transfer. Grandmaster Thorn was signing over her private Whispering Woods studio complex, a renowned retreat for artists, to me. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at her. Grandmaster Thorn replied, "I failed you, Alara." She continued, "I gave Serafina preferential treatment for years, and I didn't recognize what was happening under my nose. The studio complex includes a gallery space and provides a significant annual grant for emerging artists. It's worth approximately $700,000. Grandmaster Thorn said, "I'm transferring it to you, effective immediately." The room fell silent as I tried to process this. The property would provide not only a dedicated state-of-the-art studio, but also a platform for me to mentor other artists and, significant independent means far beyond the lost recognition. "Grandmaster, I can't accept this," I began. She interrupted me firmly. "You can and you will. It's not just about the concepts Serafina took. It's about the years of inequality, the funding I gave her but not you, the exhibition spaces she received while you toiled alone. You worked twice as hard for half the support, and that stops today." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotional reactions. "And what does Serafina have to say about all this?" I asked, finally looking directly at my sister. Serafina raised her head, her face blotchy from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know that's not enough, but I am. It started small, just borrowing a sketch here and there because I was struggling with creative blocks. Then it got easier each time. She wiped her eyes. I've signed everything. The confession, the recognition plan. I'm taking a sabbatical from public art to reevaluate my creative process. You stole from me for 6 years, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You watched me struggle financially, work in obscurity, skip major exhibitions, all while you were living off creative capital that should have been mine. And you're sorry now because you got caught? Alara, my mother interjected, she's still your sister. I responded, maybe a bit too sharply, Mom, not now. This isn't about family loyalty. It's about artistic theft and fraud on a massive scale. Grandmaster Thorne spoke carefully. Your mother's right that Serafina is still your sister, but you're right that this goes beyond a simple family dispute. That's why I insisted on the confession statement. The choice to pursue formal action remains entirely yours, Alara. I looked at Anya Sharma and asked, what happens to this agreement if I do file a formal complaint? She replied promptly, it remains valid. It would likely be viewed favorably by the Guild Review Board as an attempt at restitution and acknowledgement, but it doesn't preclude formal charges. I turned to Serafina again. Do you understand that? That I could still pursue formal action even if I signed this? She nodded miserably. I know. Anya explained it when she helped Grandmaster Thorne draft the confession. I shot a surprised look at Leo, who just shrugged. Grandmaster called me at midnight. I made sure the document would hold up legally either way. For the next hour, we went through every aspect of the agreement. Anya explained how my authorship would be publicly asserted through formal guild announcements, backed by Serafina's confession. Grandmaster Thorne outlined the property transfer and the immediate steps she'd taken to secure all guild records that Serafina had accessed. My parents sat mostly silent, occasionally asking clarifying questions but offering no defense of Serafina's actions. Throughout it all, I maintained a detached, analytical approach. Asking questions about the studio's management details, the scope of the public acknowledgements, and enforcement mechanisms for the recognition plan. Inside, however, emotions churned. Hurt, betrayal, vindication, and beneath it all, a growing sense of power I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my life, the family and artistic dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the reliable artist, quietly accepting whatever scraps of attention came my way. I was the wronged party being actively courted for forgiveness. As Anya gathered the signed documents, Serafina finally spoke directly to me without prompting. Alara, she said softly, I know you resent me right now, and you have every right to, but please believe me when I say I never meant for it to go this far. I studied my sister. The designer clothes she wore, the perfectly styled hair, all financed, at least in part, by the career built on my uncredited genius. I don't hate you, Serafina, I replied truthfully, but I don't trust you either, and I don't know if I ever will again. As Leo and I prepared to leave, Grandmaster Thorne pulled me aside in the hallway. I meant what I said about failing you, she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble. I favored Serafina because she reminded me of myself at that age, impulsive, social, struggling to find her way. You were always so capable, so responsible. I mistook your self-sufficiency for not needing support. That's a painful way to be punished for being reliable, I observed. Grandmaster Thorne nodded, and there was genuine regret in her eyes. I know, I can't undo those years, but I can try to make it right going forward. She paused for a moment, then pressed a small, intricately carved wooden box into my hand. Inside was a tiny ancient spindle, centuries old, used by Grandmaster Thorne's own matriarch. She told me, consider it an investment in the artist who's most like my own grandmother, the true visionary of our lineage. Driving home that evening with the windows down and the warm summer air rushing through the car, I felt a profound sense of peace settling over me. The past month had been painful, revealing some pretty ugly truths about my family and forcing difficult decisions. But from that pain had emerged something valuable, a stronger sense of self-worth, clearer boundaries, and the knowledge that I could advocate for myself effectively. I hadn't fully forgiven Serafina yet. That would take time and, honestly, consistent evidence of changed behavior. But I'd chosen not to let her betrayal define me or poison my other relationships. I'd found my voice and used it to demand the respect I deserved. As for the future, for the first time in my adult life, it looked genuinely bright. The new studio and its endowment would allow me to pursue my art without financial stress. I could dedicate myself entirely to my craft, maybe even take on apprentices, something I'd wanted for years but just couldn't afford before. More importantly, I discovered a resilience within myself that no betrayal could break, and no external validation could replace. The hardest lesson of this ordeal had become the most valuable true self-worth comes not from family approval or public recognition, but from honoring your own boundaries and standing firmly in your truth, regardless of the cost. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more chilling tales.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the high-stakes, pretty glittering world of textile art. We're talking about the annual Threads of Innovation Gala. This is really the event, where artists are all striving for recognition, where careers can just take off or, well, as we're going to see today, maybe come crashing down. So picture this, the super opulent grand hall of the Crimson Loom Gallery. The atmosphere is just buzzing. You can feel the anticipation. And right at the heart of it, you've got Alara Vance. She's 32, a really meticulous textile artist. She spent like a decade honing her craft, but kind of in obscurity, pouring everything into her art. And then there's her younger sister, Serafina Vance. She's 29, and she's basically the art world's darling right now, known for these huge, flamboyant installations and a massive social media presence, always hitting the headlines.
Right. And our mission today for this deep dive is to really get into an alleged betrayal between these two sisters. We're going to explore, the really intricate threads of intellectual property. So that's things like unique creative concepts, the actual expressions that artists create, which are, theoretically protected. But we're also looking at the messy stuff, complex family dynamics, and really the core of self-worth. It's a really compelling story, actually. Ambition, art, and, well, the pretty shocking unraveling of trust. And there are definitely broader lessons in here for all of us, I think.
Okay, so the big moment of the night is the Luminary Weave Award. It's about to be presented by the Grandmaster Lena Thorne. She's revered, a living legend, basically the matriarch of the whole guild. And this is where things start to get really interesting. So let's talk about Alara first. Her artistic journey has been one of quiet, almost relentless dedication. You said 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years toiling away in her small studio in Silverwood City. And she wasn't just like making pretty things. She was really pushing boundaries, experimenting with highly innovative processes. Think novel biodyes from microorganisms, developing totally new sustainable fibers like mushroom leather, stuff like that, and meticulously applying these ancient weaving techniques. Maybe, a really rare supplementary weft method, something incredibly complex.
Wow. So really deep technical work.
Exactly. And every spare coin, every waking hour, just poured into this craft. She even tried early on to get mentorship from Grandmaster Thorn.
Oh, really? What happened?
Thorn apparently told her talent was, quote, raw and deep, but basically left her to find her own way, which meant tons of painstaking research, countless sleepless nights, the hard graft.
Okay, so contrast that with Serafina.
Right. Serafina's path was, well, smoother. She enjoyed significant financial backing from Grandmaster Thorn herself, which let her create these grand, maybe sometimes superficially impactful projects. And she got the prime exhibition spaces, really easily.
So very different experiences.
And different artistic personalities, too. Alara, introverted, hyper-focused on detail, material innovation. Serafina, much more spontaneous, captivating, always ready for the spotlight, maybe prioritizing that immediate wow factor.
Okay, so back to the gala. The pivotal moment arrives. Grandmaster Thorn takes the stage.
Yep. And with this voice that just commands the whole hall, she announces Serafina is winning the Luminary Weave Award for her groundbreaking collection, Echoes of Elysium.
And you mentioned before this was just gut-wrenching for Alara. Why that title specifically?
Because Echoes of Elysium.
Yeah.
That was the exact title of her collection, an unreleased collection.
Oh, no.
Yeah, something deeply personal, existing only in her private sketchbooks, hidden away in her studio. That title, that whole concept, it was hers. So seeing it, hearing it attributed to her sister, it must have been just this sickening, immediate realization, her intellectual property right there.
And then the shock just gets deeper, right? Grandmaster Thorn reveals something else.
She does. Thorn proudly announces she had fully funded Serafina's Echoes of Elysium exhibition.
With $250,000.
$250,000.
Just that morning.
Wow. Can you even imagine? Hearing your secret project title, knowing your sister won an award for it, and then hearing the biggest patron just dropped a huge amount of cash on it.
Exactly. It's just blow after blow. And the timing. Gosh, the timing couldn't have been more devastatingly perfect, almost theatrical. Because right as that news lands, Serafina's assistant, this guy Finn, he wheels in the actual Echoes of Elysium collection for everyone to see.
He wheels in the art itself right then.
Right then and there. So Alara's confusion just turns into this undeniable horror in public, in front of her family, the critics, everyone. It's a public unveiling of this deeply private betrayal.
I can't even, so she must have just needed to get out of there.
Completely overwhelmed, she fled the hall, just needed air. Ended up in the cool, dark night, in the Thorn Estate's huge sculpture garden, trying to process this unthinkable betrayal under this, ancient wisteria arbor. Okay, so she's out there, probably reeling. How does this start to unravel? How does she get proof?
Well, about 15 minutes later, her cousin Leo finds her. He's a junior curator. Apparently he sensed something was really off back inside with all the commotion.
Right.
And he suggests something practical. He says, Alara, maybe you should check your old project files on your cloud drive. And this is where things really start to shift, where we get into the mechanics of the alleged deception.
The digital trail. Okay.
Exactly. So she accesses Grandmaster Thorn's private archive. Apparently, senior artists had some storage space there. And the discovery is chilling. There, in Alara's own unfinished concepts folder, is Echoes of Elysium. The folder itself was created 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
And the textile schematics inside. Last modified just 6 months prior. It's all meticulously dated. Digital breadcrumbs.
But wait, you said the horror didn't stop there.
No. As Alara keeps scrolling, she finds dozens of her older projects. Unreleased work going back years.
Yeah. And they're tagged public access granted, which she never did. And they list an unknown collaborator.
This is where it gets really specific about the intellectual property theft, right?
Absolutely. And we can start connecting the dots for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Serafina had serious access to Alara's digital life.
How so?
Well, think about it. She'd borrowed Alara's studio laptop before. She'd stayed over at Alara's apartment for a whole week once, had full run of the network, devices.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And apparently, she even made these casual jokes about how similar their artistic handwriting was, like in their sketches.
So not just trust, but actual physical and digital proximity.
Precisely. It's kind of a textbook example, sadly. how closeness and seemingly innocent access can become tools for, well, this kind of deep-seated intellectual property theft.
Yeah.
It really highlights a common vulnerability, doesn't it? That digital overlap in close relationships.
Yeah, it really does. So Alara keeps scrolling. What else does she find?
Her dread just intensifies. She finds about 24 more files tagged publicly accessible. Every single one shows collaborator Serafina Vance.
Serafina's name, explicitly.
Explicitly. And the dates attached to these tags, they correspond precisely with the timelines of Serafina's own so-called breakthrough collections over the past 6 years.
6 years. So this wasn't a one-time thing for the gala. This was a pattern.
A clear, systematic pattern. The implications were just staggering. Serafina had been systematically dipping into Alara's digital footprint. And they even found deleted submission forms for grants, competitions, under Alara's name, but linked somehow to Serafina's projects.
Wait, deleted forms? Why?
It strongly suggests a deliberate effort to erase evidence, to cover the tracks of creative plagiarism. This isn't just, borrowing an idea. This looks like calculated appropriation and obfuscation, trying to hide it.
So Alara has this mountain of evidence now, digital proof.
Right.
What does she do? Does she confront Serafina?
She does. Armed with this awful truth, she confronts Serafina directly, accuses her of stealing her artistic identity systematically for years.
And Serafina's response, was she horrified? Ashamed?
Defiant. Almost wheedling is the word used. Her defense was basically, my work is popular, yours is niche.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just needed a little boost. And the kicker, she actually claimed she was going to credit you eventually.
Eventually, after winning the biggest award based on it. That's quite something. Is that kind of rationalization common in these cases? Especially within families?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost a textbook response, psychologically. The perpetrator often minimizes the harm. They rationalize their actions, often by devaluing the victim's work, like calling it niche. They frame it as temporary, like borrowing, or some kind of necessary shortcut. It often points to a deep-seated sense of entitlement and, frankly, a surprising lack of empathy, which is a common thread you see in profiles of people who systematically appropriate others' work.
It also sounds like it speaks to the pressure cooker of the art world, maybe.
Definitely. That constant pressure to produce, to be recognized, to get funding, it can unfortunately drive individuals to unethical lengths. It's a known pitfall in many creative industries.
Okay, so Serafina is deflecting. What about Grandmaster Thorne? How is she reacting to all this? She presented the award, funded the exhibition.
Right. The real shock for Thorne was realizing her own blind spots. She was initially bewildered when Alara presented the evidence. But it turns out Thorne had actually started her own quiet investigation months before this gala, secretly compiling little observations in this leather-bound journal she kept.
Thorne was investigating Serafina already. Why?
She admitted she'd started noticing similarities between the sisters' work, but initially she dismissed it, called it artistic convergence. Two artists influenced by similar things. Common enough.
So what finally shifted her perspective? What made her realize it wasn't just convergence?
The evidence she meticulously gathered herself. She documented this early, uncredited piece of Alara's work that was shown anonymously about 6 years ago. And it had a near-identical core concept. Thorne's words to Serafina's big breakthrough collection, Metamorphosis, which Serafina unveiled just a month later.
A month. That's very close.
Too close to be coincidence, Thorne eventually concluded. The pattern was becoming too distinct to just ignore.
And did Thorne find other things in her investigation?
She did. More corroborating details. Things like gallery exhibition schedules. They showed Serafina's works kept appearing suspiciously soon after Alara had privately discussed some early, nascent ideas with her sister.
So Alara would mention an idea, and then soon after.
A similar concept would pop up in Serafina's public work. Thorne also found photographic evidence, discarded prototypes from Alara's studio trash.
No.
Yes. Inexplicably appearing, subtly altered, mind you, but recognizable, in Serafina's later public installations.
How would Thorne even get access to that?
That comes up later, actually, as part of her own admission. But she also gathered whispered accounts from studio assistants, people who worked in the shared spaces, confirming Serafina making late-night visits to Alara's archived digital files.
Wow, so this wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It's becoming pretty concrete, a systemic pattern.
Exactly. And the numbers Thorne's investigation finally tallied up. They were truly staggering. Her calculations pointed to approximately 27 major conceptual thefts.
27.
And direct artistic appropriations over nearly 6 years.
27. Over 6 years. That's almost, what, 4 or 5 major ideas a year? How could that possibly go unnoticed for so long within the guild or even by Alara herself?
That's a really critical question, isn't it? And part of it, I think, comes down to the slippery nature of creative inspiration itself. Ideas can converge organically sometimes. But here, it was the systematic nature of it, the speed, how quickly Serafina produced work right after Alara seemed to conceptualize something, and the subtle alterations, making the stolen concepts just different enough. It made it hard to pin down without a really dedicated, almost forensic investigation like Thorne's.
And maybe Alara just couldn't believe her sister would do that.
That's very likely a huge factor. The betrayal coming from a close family member, someone you trust implicitly. It makes it harder to even conceive of, let alone confront. It points to that profound vulnerability when trust is just so deeply embedded in a relationship.
So the impact on Alara, obviously the emotional toll must have been immense, but professionally.
Oh, absolutely devastating. This systematic theft effectively denied her years of critical acclaim she might have received. Financial stability, too. It forced her into years of struggle working in obscurity while Serafina was out there reaping the rewards, building this significant public profile based, it seems, largely on Alara's groundwork. It's a really stark example of how intellectual property theft can just fundamentally derail someone's career path.
And when confronted with Thorne's findings, too, what was Serafina's response then? Still defiant.
Not remorse, apparently. More like bitter resentment. She actually claimed it was always so easy for Alara creatively, and that Alara didn't need the recognition like she did.
Wow. Blaming the victim, essentially.
Pretty much. And this is where Grandmaster Thorne makes her own stark admission. She acknowledges her mistake in clearly favoring Serafina over the years. And she admits to her own invasion of privacy, implying she'd basically given permission or maybe turned a blind eye, allowing gallery managers and archivists to access Alara's private records during her investigation. All in pursuit of the truth, she says.
Okay, that explains the discarded prototypes maybe, but wow, that's another layer.
It is. What's fascinating here, though, is how the truth, once it starts coming out, it creates these multiple layers of betrayal, definitely. But also unexpected allies, right? As Thorne herself steps into this role of accountability, trying to make things right.
Okay, so the truth is out. What happens immediately after this confrontation, these revelations?
Well, in the immediate aftermath, Alara's phone just blows up. Messages flooding in from family members.
So supportive, I hope.
Some were supportive, yes. But others were pressuring Alara for peace over justice. You know, the classic, family matters should stay in the family line. Keep it quiet.
Ugh, that's such a common dynamic in these awful situations, isn't it? Protect the family unit, even if it means silencing the victim.
It really is. Family loyalty often clashes hard with individual justice, making these things incredibly complex emotionally and ethically. But Cousin Leo's advice becomes really crucial again here. He steps up.
The junior curator.
Yeah. He tells Alara, look, intellectual theft on this scale, it's a severe breach of the guild's ethics.
Yeah.
You know, the professional code of conduct, which is really strict about originality and collaboration. He points out it carries potentially serious consequences. Things like public censure. Imagine being publicly shamed within your professional community. Significant fines, often tied to the value of the stolen work. Maybe even permanent disbarment from major exhibitions or guild membership.
So real professional consequences.
Definitely. And Leo also highlights another critical risk. If Serafina isn't checked, what's to stop her potentially plagiarizing other artists in the future? It reinforces that this wasn't likely a one-off mistake, but maybe a pattern of behavior.
Okay, that makes sense. So things move towards a more formal resolution.
Yes. The scene is set for a meeting the next morning at Grandmaster Thorne's estate. Very formal. You've got Alara, her cousin Leo for support, her parents, Serafina, and Anya Sharma, who's from the Guild Arbitrator Services, like a mediator or investigator for the art cult.
High-stakes meeting. How does Alara approach it?
She's clearly prepared with Leo.
Yeah.
She sets a very clear boundary right from the start. She's there to listen, to hear what's proposed, but she's not committing to dropping formal charges or anything just yet. She's keeping her options open.
Smart. Okay, so what does the arbitrator propose?
Anya Sharma presents this really comprehensive document. It's called a Restitution and Recognition Agreement. It's detailed, clearly designed to offer a path forward, but one that really protects Alara's interests.
What's in it?
Okay, so first, Serafina has to formally acknowledge the 27 conceptual appropriations over the 6 years. Put it in writing.
Wow, admitting the number.
Yes. Then, there's a multi-year public acknowledgement plan. This means Serafina would be required, contractually, to explicitly credit Alara's original concepts in her future works, in artist statements, public appearances, interviews, everything.
So ongoing public correction?
Exactly. Third, Serafina has to retract all claims to the Echoes of Elysium collection immediately, and it will then be publicly credited to Alara.
She gets her project back.
She gets her project back. And maybe most importantly, the agreement includes a detailed confession statement from Serafina, signed by her, comprehensive enough that it could serve as solid evidence if Alara does decide later to pursue formal guild action or even legal action.
So it gives Alara leverage and control over the narrative going forward.
Precisely. It offered a pathway for a kind of restorative justice, but kept the door open for punitive action if needed. It gave Alara agency.
Okay, that sounds like a solid proposal from the guild side, but then something unexpected happens with Grandmaster Thorn.
Totally unexpected. Grandmaster Thorn makes this incredible offer. She announces she is signing over her private Whispering Woods studio complex to Alara.
Signing it over, what's that worth?
It's valued at approximately $700,000.
$700,000, wow.
And it's not just the property. It includes a proper gallery space and a significant annual grant that comes with the complex, specifically for supporting emerging artists.
That is incredibly generous. But like you said, it also kind of highlights her prior favoritism towards Serafina, doesn't it? Like she's trying to balance the scales massively.
Absolutely. It's clearly an act of profound accountability on Thorn's part, yes. But you're right, it also throws into sharp relief those systemic issues within artistic patronage.
Yeah.
How established figures can, even inadvertently, create environments where exploitation like this can happen through unequal support or just blind spots. Thorn's motivation was stated very clearly, though. She looked at Alara and said, "I failed you, Alara." She acknowledged years of inequality in how she treated the sisters, her preferential treatment of Serafina. And she admitted mistaking Alara's quiet self-sufficiency for not actually needing support or mentorship. This was a huge act of restitution, not just financially, but morally, too, it seems.
Okay, so Thorn makes this massive gesture. How does Serafina react to all this? The agreement, Thorn's offer.
Serafina apparently was tearful by this point. She offered an apology, claimed it started small, maybe borrowing a tiny element, and then it just got easier over time.
The slippery slope argument.
Kind of. She did agree to sign everything in the restitution agreement. And she announced she was planning to take a sabbatical from public art to sort of reevaluate her creative process, she said.
And Lara, after all this, the confession, the apologies, the huge offer from Thorn, how did she respond?
Alara's response was described as steady, powerful. She looked directly at Serafina, and she stated very clearly that she doesn't hate her sister, but she doesn't trust her, and she doesn't know if she ever will again.
Wow. That's incredibly honest and brave to say that in front of everyone.
It really is, and it speaks volumes, doesn't it? This isn't about demanding immediate forgiveness or pretending everything's okay now. It's about establishing fundamental, honest boundaries about trust.
Exactly. It really hits on that profound truth about trust once it's shattered like that, especially over years. You can't just flick a switch and turn it back on.
Yeah.
It's this complex, often really lengthy process of reevaluation, and sometimes, maybe often, it involves accepting that full trust just might never return. And her saying that so calmly in that setting, that's a huge act of self-preservation, asserting her own reality, her own feelings, her self-worth, really.
Absolutely. And then Grandmaster Thorn adds this final symbolic gesture. It was described as deeply touching. She gifted Alara this tiny ancient spindle, centuries old apparently, something used by Thorn's own matriarch, her ancestor weaver.
A family heirloom.
Yeah. And as she gave it to Alara, she called her the true visionary of our lineage, recognizing not just Alara's talent, finally, but also her incredible resilience through all this.
That's powerful symbolism in their world, I imagine.
Huge.
So, looking back at this whole story, Alara Vance's journey is just incredible. It's this massive transformation, isn't it? From being essentially a long-term victim of artistic fraud to becoming this really resilient advocate for herself and her work.
Definitely. And it's such a complex mix, isn't it? Family loyalty, twisting things, the fight for artistic integrity, and just the sheer courage it takes to finally stand up and demand the recognition you deserve.
Yeah. And it seems like she found peace in the end.
It seems she found a profound sense of peace, yeah. But interestingly, the sources suggest it wasn't necessarily from forgiving Serafina, at least not yet. That might come or might not. The peace came from asserting her own self-worth, from drawing those clear, unyielding boundaries. And of course, the practical side helps the new studio, the endowment. that gives her not just financial stability, finally, but real freedom.
Freedom to pursue her art without constraint.
Exactly. And even perhaps to mentor other emerging artists herself someday, using that grant money. It's a really powerful example of how taking control of your own narrative, even after something awful, can lead to unexpected personal and professional liberation.
It really is. The story of Alara Vance, I think, offers such a potent lesson in standing firmly in your truth, no matter how difficult or painful that truth might be, especially when family is involved.
Absolutely. So thinking about this deep dive, what does this all mean for you, the listener? This story of a sister's betrayal, it really makes us consider, doesn't it? How do you define your own self-worth, especially when you face perceived slights or maybe even actual betrayal? And what does it truly take to honor your own boundaries when challenges arise, particularly from those unexpected places like family or close friends? Something to think about.